Hey, this is David with Beat Your Face Commander. The deck tech I'm doing today is Talrand Sky Summoner. He's a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. So this deck, not very creature heavy. It's got a lot of instants and sorceries. The general idea behind the deck is to evade your opponents and steal their stuff. Take extra turns. Generally do things that people in Magic don't like. So, I'm going to go through by card types. For artifacts, I'm running Sensei's Divining Top. Let's look at the top three of your cards of your library, put them back in any order, or you can tap to draw a card and put the top back on its owner's library. I do have an actual top, but I proxy one as well because top's pretty expensive. Run a Soul Ring, Thought Vessel. Having no maximum hand size is kind of nice in this deck. Run a Mind Stone, Arcane Signet, a Worn Power Stone, a Talrand Dynamo, and then a couple of other artifacts that are pretty big in this deck. We got Vidalcan Orrery, which lets me place my sorceries at flash speed, at instant speed, and then Primal Amulet. So instants and sorceries cost one less to cast, and then whenever you do, you put a charge counter on it. If there are 4 more charge counters on it, you can remove them and transform it into Primal Wellspring. You can tap it to add mana of any color to your mana pool, and when you use it to cast an instant or sorcery, you get to copy it and choose new targets. This card, these two cards are really important in this deck. So then some other stuff. Suspend. Basically, you put 2 time counters on a creature, potentially take it out of combat, or take it out of the game for a couple of turns. Alright. Stern Dismissal. Return a target creature or enchantment to their owner's hand. Unsummon. Reads through time to draw a card. Opt for Scry and draw a card. See Beyond. You draw 2 cards, and then you shuffle 1 into your library. Secrets of the Golden City. If you have the Sage Blessing, you draw 3. If not, you can draw 2 cards. Divination to draw 2 cards. Raven Form lets you exile an artifact or creature. The controller gets a 1/1 bird. And it has a foretell cost. Inevitable Betrayal. So it suspends 3 for 2 islands and a generic. Once the time counters are removed, you get to search an opponent's library for a creature card and put it on the battlefield under your control. Tempted by the Auric. For each opponent, gain a control of up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls with mana value 3 or less. Time Warp for extra turns. Temporal Manipulation for extra turns. Finale Revelation. If you can cast it for 10 or more, you get to draw. Well, basically, you draw X cards. If X is 10 or more, instead shuffle your graveyard into your library, draw X cards, untap up to 5 lands, and you have no maximum hand size the rest of the game. Then you would exile it. Mass Manipulation lets you take control of X target creatures or planeswalkers. Little Mage's Domination costs 3 less to cast if it targets a creature whose controller has 8 or more cards in graveyard. And then you can gain control of a target creature at converted mana cost of X. Trancing Melody, same thing basically. Expropriate. No one likes this card. Me neither. Starting with you, each player votes for time or money. Like realistically with this card, your opponent's best bet is to vote for money, so they give you stuff. Your best bet is to hope they vote for time, and you should vote for time. Preordained, draw scry 2, then draw a card. Clutch of the Currents, return target creatures on your hand. Scour all possibilities, scry 2, then draw. Radical Idea, draw. You come to a river. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. That's essentially what I would do with this. Snap, same thing, return a creature to its owner's hand. You can untap up to 2 lands. Recalibrate, same thing, you can return a target creature to its owner's hand. If you discard a card this turn, you get to draw a card. Deliberate, scry and draw. Disperse, return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Resculpt, you can exile a target artifact or creature. They get a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. Lofty Denial, then you get a counter target spell unless they pay 1, but if you control a creature with flying, they have to pay 4. Since it's an instant triggering Talrand, you should be getting plenty of flying creatures. Good old counterspell. Disdainful Stroke counters a target spell with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Mana Leak makes them pay extra. Peer through the depths. You can look at the top 5 cards of your library and reveal an instance or sorcery card from and put it in your hand. Divide by 0. Turn target spell or permanent with mana value 1 or greater to its owner's hand. Wipe Away has Split Second. Again, as I said, this deck's a lot about evasion and denying your opponents the resources they need. Force of Negation is a counterspell. Unwind counters non-creature spells, and you get to untap 3 lands. And Snare lets you tap all creatures. Last Word, this counterspell can't be countered. Engulf the Shore, return to owner's hands all creatures with toughness less than or equal to the number of islands you control. If things are getting out of hand, you need to wipe the board. That's a good way to do so. Rewind's another counterspell that lets you untap up to 4 lands. Force of Will. Say no more. Confounding Conundrum. This is good against landfall decks. When it enters, you get to draw a card, and then whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player had another land enter the battlefield under their control this turn, they return a land they control to their owner's hand. So, I mean, it's good against landfall. In some ways, it's bad in others. Basically, it just keeps them from ramping out too hard. Mirror Maid lets you copy an artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. Mind's Dilation. This is a real spicy card. Never really used it in a deck before, but I'm excited. I'm hoping it works well. Whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, that player exiles the top card of their library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Free stuff. Yeah, it costs 7, but it's pretty spicy. There's some creatures to go along with all this stuff. We have Thing in the Ice. It's a 0/4 defender. It enters with 4 ice counters on it. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell, remove an ice counter. Once it has no more ice counters, you transform it into a 7/8 Kraken Horror that returns all non-horror creatures to their owner's hands. It's a nice little board wipe. Sphinx of Foresight. You get a scry 1 beginning of your upkeep. If it's in your opening hand, you can scry 3 at the beginning of your first upkeep. It's a 4/4 flyer for 4. It's just generally a good card for a blue deck. Naiad of the Hidden Coves, as long as it's not your turn. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So, makes those instants cheaper. Potentially the sorceries, depending on what's on the board. Wavebreaker Hippocamp. Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, you get to draw a card. Mirror Image lets you turn one of your things into a clone of something else. Spark Double. Archmage Emeritus. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. Master of Waves. Just good for putting some stuff on the board. Considering your devotion to blue should be relatively high in this deck, as it is mono blue. It's got protection from red. Elemental creatures you control get +1/+1, and when it enters the battlefield, create a number of 0 or 1/0 blue elemental creature tokens equal your devotion. Body of Knowledge. Its power and toughness are equal number of cards in your hand. Takes away your maximum hand size, and whenever it's dealt damage, you can draw that many cards. And a Planeswalker, Teferi, Master of Time. This dude's a beast. You can activate loyalty counters on everybody's turn. It's +1s to draw a card and then discard a card. I'm not really concerned about the -3 of phasing out creatures. But then the -10 lets you take 2 extra turns. So for land, it's got a pretty simple land base. One, it's got a reliquary tower. Same thing, just a number of ways to get to increase your maximum hand size, or basically to eliminate your maximum hand size. And then just the rest of it is islands. So that's Talrand, mono blue. Purpose is to, once again, negate the resources of your opponents while you're building up your own base and then stealing their stuff.